He kicked me and our daughters out into a blizzard because I couldn't give him a son. 3 years later, he invited me to his wedding to show off his perfect heir and ruin my reputation. But when my private jet landed on his lawn, exposing the truth he tried to hide, his smile died instantly. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, grab a warm cup of tea and get comfortable. I'd love to know what time of day you're watching this video. Please comment M for morning, A for afternoon, or E for evening. Now, let me take you into this story. The roar of the engines was the first thing they heard. It started as a low rumble, distant and easily ignored over the clinking of champagne glasses and the soft melody of the string quartet. But within seconds, it grew into a deafening, chest-vibrating thunder that drowned out every other sound in the exclusive Lake Forest resort. I watched through the small oval window of the Gulfstream G650 as the manicured green lawn below rushed up to meet us. From this height, the wedding guests looked like panicked ants scattering in every direction. The white folding chairs, the elaborate floral arches, the massive ice sculpture of a swan, everything was vibrating from the sheer power of our approach. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear, but from a potent mixture of adrenaline and cold, hard satisfaction. I smoothed the fabric of my royal blue dress. It was a color Grant had always forbidden me to wear. He used to say it was too bold, too loud, that a wife's job was to blend into the background, to be a pale pastel accessory to his dark suits. Today, I was anything but background noise. Are you ready, Mom? Hazel asked, reaching over to squeeze my hand. She was 13 now, sharp-witted and fiercely protective. I was born ready for this, I whispered, though my voice trembled slightly. Beside her, Holly looked out the window with a grin that was almost predatory. Look at his face, Mom. Just look at him. I followed her gaze. Down below, standing on the raised platform where the altar had been set up, was Grant. Even from this distance, I could see the color draining from his face. He was clutching the microphone like a lifeline, his mouth hanging open in a comical O shape. Next to him stood Tiffany, his bride-to-be, looking less like a blushing bride and more like a furious statue, her hands instinctively covering her stomach. The pilot executed a perfect, soft landing on the private airstrip that ran adjacent to the lawn, a strip of land that belonged to the resort, which Grant had failed to secure for exclusive use because he was too cheap to pay the premium. The jet taxied slowly, turning so that the door faced the gathered crowd of 300 elite guests. These were his investors, his business rivals, the cream of Chicago society, and the very people he had poisoned against me for the last 3 years. The engines whined down, and a hush fell over the crowd. The silence was heavier than the noise had been. Everyone was staring. The door hissed open. The stairs unfolded automatically. I stood up, taking a deep breath. I wasn't just Meredith, the discarded ex-wife anymore. I wasn't the woman who had been thrown out into the snow. I was the architect of my own destiny, and I was about to bring the whole structure of his lies crashing down. Let's go, girls, I said. I stepped out into the afternoon sun. The wind caught my dress, making the blue silk billow around me like a cape. I held my head high, descending the stairs with the grace of a woman who owns the ground she walks on. Holly and Hazel followed, dressed in matching designer outfits that screamed old money and new confidence. And behind us, stepping out last with an air of quiet, dangerous authority, was Preston. A collective gasp ripped through the crowd. I saw heads turn. I saw whispers ignite like wildfire. Isn't that Meredith? My God, look at her. Is that Preston Vance? The billionaire? What is he doing with her? I walked straight toward the red carpet that led to the altar. I didn't wait for an invitation. I didn't wait for permission. The security guards Grant had hired looked confused, unsure whether to stop the woman who had just arrived in a $60 million jet or to step aside. They chose to step aside. Grant's face had gone from pale to a sickly shade of purple. He lowered the microphone, his hands shaking. Meredith, he croaked, his voice cracking without the amplification. What are you doing here? You're ruining everything. I stopped 10 feet away from him. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. I simply smiled, a cold, dazzling smile that didn't reach my eyes. Ruining it? I asked, my voice projecting clearly in the stunned silence. Oh, Grant. I'm not here to ruin anything. You invited me, remember? You sent that letter begging me to come, saying you wanted to show everyone that we were a modern, happy extended family. You wanted to clear your name so your stock prices would stop plummeting. I reached into my clutch and pulled out not a gift, but a thick manila envelope. You wanted a show, Grant, I said, stepping onto the platform. The click of my heels on the wood echoed like gunshots. So, I brought you the grand finale. Grant lunged forward, trying to grab the envelope, panic wild in his eyes. Don't you dare! Security! Get her out of here! But Preston stepped up beside me, blocking Grant with a single, imposing step. Preston didn't need to shout. He just looked at Grant, and Grant froze. I turned to the audience, to the cameras that were undoubtedly rolling, and to the man who had tried to destroy me. I held the envelope high. 3 years ago, you threw your children into a blizzard because they weren't boys, I said, my voice steady as steel. Today, you're marrying this woman because she promised you a son. But before you say I do, there's something everyone here needs to know about your perfect heir. Grant looked like he was about to have a heart attack. Tiffany let out a shriek of horror. And I knew, in that split second, that I had one. Thank you so much for tuning in. Before I tell you exactly what was in that envelope and how Grant's life fell apart in the next 5 minutes, I want to know who is standing with me today. If you are watching this, please comment below with the city or country you are watching from. I love seeing how far our community reaches. Seeing your comments makes me feel like I'm talking to close friends. Alright, now let me take you back to where this nightmare began, so you can understand why this moment was so sweet. To understand the sheer magnitude of that moment on the lawn, you have to go back 3 years. You have to trade the lush green grass and the private jet for a freezing, gray Chicago sky and the smell of wood smoke mixed with betrayal. It was Christmas Eve. The kind of winter night where the wind howls around the corners of the house like a wounded animal. I was in the study of the Victorian mansion in the suburbs that we called home. I had just finished the final blueprints for the Lakeview Spire, a 40-story commercial complex that was supposed to be the crown jewel of Grant's development company. I had spent 6 months on those designs. Late nights, missed dinners, working while the twins were asleep. Grant was the face of the company, the charismatic CEO who shook hands and cut ribbons, but I was the architect. I was the one who made sure the buildings didn't fall down. I was the one who solved the zoning issues. But my name was never on the documents. It was always Grant Enterprises. I told myself it didn't matter. We were a team. We were husband and wife. His success was our family's success. I heard the heavy oak door creak open. Grant walked in. He smelled of expensive scotch and cold air. He didn't look at the blueprints spread out on the desk, the work that was going to save his company from the financial slump it had been in. We need to talk, he said. His voice was flat, devoid of the warmth he usually faked so well. I looked up, rubbing my tired eyes. Can it wait, honey? I just need to check the load-bearing calculations on the atrium one more time. If we get this bid, the bonus will cover the girls' private school tuition for the next 5 years. Grant laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound. He walked over to the desk, picked up the blueprints, and stared at them with contempt. There isn't going to be any tuition, Meredith. Not for them. He turned and walked toward the fireplace, where a log fire was crackling. Before I could process what was happening, he threw the rolls of paper into the flames. Grant! I screamed, lunging forward. What are you doing? That's the original copy. He caught my wrist, his grip bruising. He shoved me back against the desk. I don't care about the building, Meredith. I don't care about your little drawings. I'm done. My heart stopped. Done? What do you mean? I mean, I want a divorce. He spat the words out like they tasted bad. I'm sick of this. I'm sick of waiting. 10 years, Meredith. 10 years, and what have you given me? Holly and Hazel. He said our daughters' names like they were a disease. 2 girls. Useless. My father built this company from nothing. He needs a grandson. I need a son to carry on the name, to inherit the legacy. And you. He looked me up and down with a sneer that made my skin crawl. Your genetics are garbage. You can't give me a king. I stared at him, unable to breathe. A king? Grant, this isn't the Middle Ages. We have 2 beautiful, intelligent daughters. They get straight A's. Holly is a math whiz, Hazel plays the violin. They are girls. Grant roared, his face turning red. They will marry some other man and change their names. They won't carry the legacy. I need a male heir. And I'm not going to waste another year on a mule that can't breed a racehorse. The cruelty of his words slapped me harder than any physical blow. So that's it? You're throwing away our marriage, our family, because of gender? It's about survival, he said coldly, adjusting his cufflinks. And I've already found someone who can give me what I need. Someone younger. Someone with better stock. I felt the room spin. You're cheating on me. I'm securing my future, he corrected. Now, pack your bags. I want you out. Out? Grant, it's Christmas Eve. It's 10 degrees below zero outside. The roads are iced over. Not my problem, he said, walking to the door. The house is in my name. The accounts are in my name. My lawyers will contact you about the divorce settlement, which, frankly, will be zero since you signed that prenup without reading it properly. I helped build this company. I cried, tears finally spilling over. Those designs, half the portfolio is my work. Prove it, he smiled, a chilling, triumphant smile. Your name isn't on a single contract. Legally, you were just a housewife who liked to doodle. He opened the door and gestured to the hallway. You have 30 minutes. Take your daughters and get out. If you're not gone by the time I finish my drink, I'm calling the police and telling them you're trespassing. I stood there, shaking, looking at the fire that was consuming months of my hard work. But it wasn't just blueprints burning in that fireplace. It was my trust, my love, and the decade of my life I had wasted on a man who saw me as nothing more than a failed broodmare. I didn't beg. I didn't scream. I thought of Holly and Hazel upstairs, sleeping in their matching pajamas, dreaming of Santa Claus. I had to be strong. I wiped my face, straightened my spine, and walked past him. You will regret this, Grant, I whispered. You think you're a king? You're just a fool with a crown made of fool's gold. He just laughed. Get out, Meredith. And take your useless daughters with you. That laughter followed me up the stairs, and it echoed in my nightmares for years. But little did I know, the nightmare was just beginning. The blizzard outside was nothing compared to the storm he was about to unleash on us. The hallway felt miles long as I ran toward the girls' room. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the doorknob. Inside, the room was warm, illuminated by the soft glow of a nightlight shaped like a star. Holly and Hazel were sound asleep, tangled in their duvets. I took a breath, forcing the panic down into a tight ball in my stomach. I couldn't terrify them. Not yet. Girls, I whispered, shaking them gently. Wake up. We need to go on an adventure. Hazel rubbed her eyes, blinking sleepily. Mom? Is it Christmas morning? The innocence in her question broke my heart into a million pieces. No, baby. It's, something came up. We have to go stay at a hotel tonight. Like a slumber party. Holly sat up, sensing the tension immediately. She was always the observant one. Why are you crying? Did Dad yell again? We just need to pack, I evaded, pulling 2 suitcases from the closet. Quickly. Warm clothes. Coats, boots, scarves. Everything warm you have. We threw things into the bags haphazardly. I grabbed their school uniforms, a few favorite books, and the small jewelry box my grandmother had left me, the only thing of value I owned that Grant hadn't bought. I didn't take any of the jewelry Grant had given me. I didn't want his shackles anymore. Downstairs, the clock chimed. 20 minutes had passed. We walked down the grand staircase, carrying our own bags. Grant was standing in the foyer. But he wasn't alone. His parents, Robert and Eleanor, were there too. They lived in the guest cottage on the estate. They must have come over when they saw the lights. For a second, a flicker of hope sparked in my chest. Surely, Robert and Eleanor wouldn't let this happen. Eleanor had knitted sweaters for the girls. Robert had taught them how to play chess. Eleanor, I pleaded, stopping at the bottom of the stairs. Please. Talk to him. He's throwing us out in a blizzard. Eleanor looked at me, her face a mask of cold indifference. She was wearing a silk robe and holding a glass of sherry. She looked at Holly and Hazel, her own granddaughters, and then looked away. Grant tells us you've been unstable, Eleanor said, her voice smooth and poisonous. That you've been having episodes. Hysteria. What? I gasped. That's a lie. You know me. I've been working on the designs for the new tower. A woman's mind isn't built for business, dear, Robert chimed in, stepping forward. It puts too much strain on the womb. That's probably why you couldn't produce a male heir. You used up all your energy trying to be a man. I looked at them, horrified. The apple hadn't fallen far from the tree. The rotting Grant came directly from these roots. They didn't care about the girls. They only cared about the dynasty. Grandma? Hazel whispered, her voice trembling. It's cold outside. Eleanor took a sip of her sherry. You should have listened to your father, girls. Children should be seen and not heard. And wives should know their place. Grant checked his watch. Time's up. He walked over to the front door and threw it open. A gust of wind carrying snow and ice blasted into the foyer, instantly chilling the air. The darkness outside looked absolute. Go, he barked. I grabbed the girl's hands tight. You will never see us again, I told Grant. When you are old and alone, remember this moment. I'll have a son by then, he sneered. I won't even remember your names. He stepped forward and physically shoved me. I stumbled out onto the porch, pulling the girls with me to keep them from falling. The door slammed shut behind us. The sound of the heavy deadbolt sliding into place echoed like a gunshot. We were alone. The wind hit us like a physical blow. It screamed in our ears, biting through our coats instantly. The snow was coming down in thick, blinding sheets. Mom, I'm scared, Holly cried, clutching my arm. Where are we going? To the car, I shouted over the wind. We'll go to the car. We trudged down the driveway to where my SUV was parked. I dug my keys out of my pocket, my fingers numb. I pressed the unlock button. Nothing. I pressed it again. The lights didn't flash. The doors didn't open. I tried the manual key in the lock. It turned, but the engine wouldn't start. It was dead. Then my phone buzzed. A text message from Grant. Company car. I disabled it remotely. It's reported stolen if you try to take it. Start walking. I screamed a sound of pure frustration and rage into the wind. He had thought of everything. He wanted to break me completely. He wanted me to crawl. Mom? Hazel was crying now. My feet hurt. I looked down at them. We couldn't stay here. We would freeze to death on his driveway, and he would probably just step over our frozen bodies in the morning to get the paper. Come on, I said, grabbing the suitcases. We have to walk to the main road. We can catch a taxi or an Uber. We walked. The snow was knee-deep in places. It took us 20 minutes just to get to the estate gates. By the time we reached the public road, we were shivering violently. I pulled out my phone to call an Uber. Account suspended. I tried my credit card app. Card declined. He had frozen the joint accounts. He had reported the cards lost or stolen. I had $10 in cash in my pocket and a phone that was rapidly losing battery in the cold. I looked at my daughters. Their lips were turning blue. The snow was matting their eyelashes. We were homeless, penniless, and invisible in the middle of a blizzard. It's going to be okay, I lied, my teeth chattering. I see a bus stop up ahead. It has a shelter. We huddled together in the glass enclosure of the bus stop. It offered barely any protection from the bitter cold. I wrapped my coat around both of them, leaving myself exposed to the biting wind. I held them close, rubbing their backs, whispering prayers I wasn't sure I believed in anymore. That night, huddled in the dark, watching the snow bury the world, something inside me died. The Meredith who wanted to please everyone, the Meredith who sought approval, the gentle architect, she froze to death in that bus stop. And in her place, something else began to form. Something cold. Something hard. Something that would survive. The bus didn't come for an hour. When it finally wheezed into view, its headlights cutting through the swirling snow like yellow eyes, I felt a wave of relief so intense it made me dizzy. I used the last of my crumpled cash to pay the fare. The driver, a tired-looking man with gray stubble, looked at our expensive coats and luggage, then at our blue lips and terrified eyes. He didn't ask questions. He just nodded and turned up the heat. We rode to the city center. I didn't know where else to go. The suburbs felt like enemy territory now. We got off near Union Station. The city was a ghost town, empty streets slick with ice, holiday decorations twinkling mockingly in shop windows. We found a 24-hour diner that smelled of stale coffee and grease. I ordered a single cup of tea and asked for 2 glasses of hot water, pretending we were waiting for someone. The waitress, a woman in her 60s with Brenda on her name tag, took one look at the girls shivering in the booth and brought us 3 hot chocolates and a plate of fries. On the house, honey, she whispered, placing the steaming mugs down. Looks like you've had a hell of a night. I couldn't speak. If I opened my mouth, I would sob, and if I started sobbing, I wouldn't stop. I just nodded, clutching the warm mug with both hands, letting the heat seep into my frozen fingers. Holly and Hazel devoured the fries like they hadn't eaten in days. Watching them eat, looking at the dark circles under their eyes, a fierce, hot anger began to replace the cold fear in my chest. Grant was probably sitting by the fire right now, sipping his scotch, laughing with his parents about how he had taken out the trash. He thought he had won. He thought we would disappear, fade away into poverty and obscurity. I looked out the diner window. Through the snow, I could see the skyline of Chicago. And there, rising majestically against the dark clouds, was the Centurion Tower. It was a 50-story residential skyscraper I had designed 4 years ago. It was sleek, modern, with a unique glass curve that caught the light at dawn. It was award-winning. Grant had accepted the Developer of the Year award for it. He had stood on the podium, holding the trophy, while I sat in the audience, clapping until my hands hurt, proud of his success. He lived in the penthouse of that building. A building I created. He was warm and safe inside the walls of my imagination, while I was sitting in a diner with $3 to my name, wondering where my children would sleep. The irony tasted like bile. "Mom," Holly whispered, dipping a fry into her hot chocolate. "Are we poor now?" I looked at her. "No," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "We are just staring over. This is temporary." "But Dad said we're useless," Hazel said softly, staring into her mug. "He said girls can't do anything." I reached across the table and lifted her chin so she had to look at me. "Listen to me closely. Your father is a fool. He sees the world through a keyhole, and he thinks that's the whole sky. You are not useless. You are brilliant. You are strong. And we are going to prove him wrong." We stayed in the diner until the manager gave us a look that meant we had overstayed our welcome. It was 3 a.m. I called the only cheap motel I could find on my phone app that accepted cash on arrival. It was a seedy place on the outskirts, the kind of place you rent by the hour. It took us another bus ride and a long walk to get there. The room smelled of cigarettes and mildew. The carpet was sticky. There was a stain on the ceiling that looked suspiciously like old blood. I pushed the dresser in front of the door and checked the window lock 3 times. I put the girls in the single bed, keeping my coat on as a blanket for them. I sat in the broken armchair by the window, watching the streetlights flicker. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Grant's face. I pulled out a small notebook from my purse. It was the only sketchbook I had managed to save. I opened it to a blank page. "I solemnly swear," I wrote, the pen digging deep into the paper, "that I will take back what is mine. I will not just survive. I will build an empire so tall that Grant will have to crane his neck to see me." He wanted a legacy? I'll give him a legacy. I will become his competition. I will become his nightmare. I looked at the sentence. It felt ridiculous. I was a homeless mother in a motel room. Grant was a multi-millionaire. But as I stared at the words, I remembered the Centurion Tower. I remembered the load-bearing calculations. I remembered the intricate zoning laws I had navigated. I knew his business better than he did. He was the face, I was the brain. He had cut off his own head and thought he could still walk. I spent the rest of the night drafting a plan. Not a design for a building, but a design for a life. Step 1, survival. Step 2, employment. Step 3, revenge. Morning came with a gray, sickly light. My phone beeped. 5% battery left. But there was a notification. An email from Vance and Associates. Preston Vance. Grant's arch-rival. The only developer in the city who could match Grant's scale. Rumor had it they hated each other because of a deal gone wrong 10 years ago. I stared at the screen. Grant had blacklisted me. No friend would hire me. But an enemy? An enemy might just be interested in a weapon. And I was a loaded gun. I used the last of the battery to find the address of Preston Vance's headquarters. It was a long shot. It was desperate. But it was all I had. "Wake up, girls," I said, standing up and buttoning my coat. "We're going to a job interview." The walk to the financial district was brutal. The snow had stopped, but the wind chill was 20 below zero. The sidewalks were icy obstacle courses. We dragged our suitcases through the slush, 3 figures in ruined coats, invisible to the hurried commuters in their warm wool and leather. Holly and Hazel were exhausted. They didn't complain, but I could see the drag in their steps. I felt a crushing guilt with every shiver that racked their small bodies. I was failing them. If this didn't work, we were going to a shelter. Preston Vance's office was in a sleek, obsidian black tower that loomed over the city like a fortress. It was intimidating. Unwelcoming. We reached the lobby. It was warm, so warm it hurt. My frozen skin prickled and burned as the blood rushed back. The security guard at the desk looked up, his eyes scanning our disheveled appearance, the suitcases, the wet boots leaving puddles on the marble floor. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone making it clear he wanted us to leave. "I'm here to see Mr. Vance," I said, trying to summon the authority I used to have when I managed construction sites. "My name is Meredith. Meredith Sterling." I used my maiden name. I wanted nothing of Grant's anymore. The guard smirked. "Do you have an appointment, Ms. Sterling?" "No, but..." "Mr. Vance doesn't see walk-ins. Especially not." He gestured vaguely at my luggage. "Please leave before I call the police." "You don't understand," I pressed, desperation leaking into my voice. "I have vital information about a competitor." "Just tell him." "Ma'am, go. Now." He stood up, his hand resting on his belt. I felt the room sway. The lack of food, the sleepless night, the stress, it all crashed down on me at once. My vision blurred. The edges of the world turned black. "Mom!" I heard Hazel scream. My knees hit the marble floor. I didn't pass out completely, but I couldn't stand. I was on the floor, gasping for air, clutching my chest. The girls were kneeling beside me, crying. "Get them out of here," the guard shouted into his radio. "We have a homeless situation in the lobby." Then, the elevator doors pinged open. A sharp, commanding voice cut through the chaos. "What is going on here?" The guard froze. "Mr. Vance." "I'm sorry, sir. Just some vagrants. I'm removing them now." I lifted my head. Through the haze, I saw a man standing there. He was tall, wearing a charcoal suit that fit perfectly. He had silver fox hair and eyes that were sharp, intelligent, and currently narrowed in annoyance. Preston Vance. He looked at the guard, then down at us. His gaze swept over the girls, then landed on me. He paused. He didn't look at my dirty coat or my messy hair. He looked at my face. He squinted slightly, as if trying to solve a puzzle. Then, he stepped closer. He crouched down, ignoring the wet slush on the floor ruining his Italian shoes. "I know you," he said softly. His voice was deep, resonant. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. "You're the woman from the gala last year," he said, his mind working fast. "You were standing behind Grant." "But that's not it, wait." He looked at my hands, calloused from drafting, ink-stained even now. The Centurion Tower. The atrium design. The sketches were signed MS in the corner of the original submission. I saw them when the city made the plans public for zoning. He looked into my eyes. "You're the architect. Not Grant. You." I nodded, tears of relief leaking out. "Yes. I drew them. I drew them all." Preston stood up abruptly. He turned to the security guard, his face thunderous. "Do you know who this is?" "No, sir, This is the most talented architect in Chicago," Preston barked. "Pick up her bags. Now." He turned back to me and extended a hand. It was a strong, warm hand. "Can you stand?" "I think so," I whispered. I took his hand. He pulled me up with effortless strength. He looked at Holly and Hazel, who were staring at him with wide, fearful eyes. "Are you hungry?" he asked them, his voice softening instantly. "Yes," Holly whispered. "Come upstairs," Preston said. My assistant will order breakfast. Whatever you want. Pancakes, waffles, omelets. Why? I asked, leaning against the reception desk for support. Why are you helping us? You hate Grant. Preston looked at me, and for a moment, the mask of the ruthless businessman slipped. I saw something ancient and sad in his eyes. I hate Grant because he's a thief and a liar, Preston said. But I respect talent. And I don't leave children in the cold. I see a lot of things, Meredith. And right now, I see an opportunity. Grant threw you away? Yes, I said. Last night. Then he's an even bigger idiot than I thought, Preston said, a grim smile touching his lips. Come with me. Let's discuss how we're going to make him regret that. We followed him into the elevator. The doors closed, shutting out the cold lobby. As the elevator ascended, rising higher and higher above the city, I felt the first true spark of hope. I wasn't just being rescued. I was being recruited. Preston's office was magnificent. It wasn't like Grant's office, which was cluttered with trophies and photos of himself shaking hands with politicians. Preston's space was minimalist, open, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. It was a workspace, not a shrine to ego. He settled the girls in a plush waiting area with a secretary named Sarah, a kind woman who immediately produced hot cocoa and a menu from the best bistro in the building. Once I saw they were safe and eating, I followed Preston into his inner sanctum. He poured me a glass of water, not coffee. You look dehydrated, he noted. I took the glass, my hands finally steady. Thank you. He sat behind his desk, steepling his fingers. He didn't waste time with small talk. Tell me everything. Legally speaking. Did you sign a non-compete? I signed nothing regarding employment, I said, my professional instincts kicking back in. I was never technically an employee. I was a consultant paid through a spousal allowance to avoid payroll taxes. Grant thought he was being clever, saving money. Preston laughed, a rich, genuine sound. His cheapness is his undoing. So, you're a free agent. You own your intellectual property? The designs for the Centurion are his property, I admitted. But the ideas? The style? The knowledge of the Lakeview Spire project? That's all in here. I tapped my temple. I know the zoning flaws in his current proposal. I know where he's cutting corners on materials to siphon money for his lifestyle. I know the weak points in his foundation, literal and metaphorical. Preston leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. I'm listening. I need a job, I said flatly. I don't want charity, Mr. Vance. I need a salary. A high one. I have 2 daughters to raise, legal fees to fight for my assets, and a life to rebuild. In exchange, I will give you the blueprints for a tower that will eclipse the spire. I have a design I've been working on in secret. It's better than anything Grant has ever put his name on. And Grant? Preston asked. What do you want to happen to him? I want to beat him, I said. Fair and square. I want him to look out his window and see my building blocking his sun. I want him to know that the useless woman he threw out is the reason he lost. Preston stared at me for a long moment. Then, he opened a drawer and pulled out a checkbook. I'm giving you a signing bonus of $50,000, he said, writing as he spoke. This is for housing, clothes, and getting your kids back into school. Your starting salary will be $200,000 a year, plus commission on completed projects. You start today. We have a guest suite in the building you can use until you find an apartment. I stared at the check he slid across the desk. It was more money than I had ever had access to in my own name. Grant gave me an allowance, but he audited every receipt. Why? I asked again. This is a risk. I'm a liability. He'll sue. Let him sue, Preston shrugged. I have better lawyers. And Meredith? He paused, his expression softening. I lost my wife and son 5 years ago. Car accident. Drunk driver. I gasped. I didn't know. I'm so sorry. I built this empire for them. He looked out the window at the gray sky. When they died, I almost burned it all down. I know what it's like to have your family ripped away. I know what it's like to be left with nothing but ghosts. Grant threw away what I would give every dollar in my bank account to have back. He doesn't deserve you, and he certainly doesn't deserve those children. He looked back at me, his eyes fierce. We are going to crush him, Meredith. Not just for business, but for principle. I took the check. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. Where do I set up? I asked. Next to me, Preston said. We're partners now. That afternoon, I didn't rest. I went shopping. Not for fun, but for armor. I bought a sharp black suit. I bought warm coats for the girls. I rented a serviced apartment near the office. When I looked in the mirror that night, the exhausted, terrified woman from the bus stop was gone. In her place was someone new. Someone dangerous. I called the best divorce attorney in the city, a shark named Jessica Pearson. I want to file for divorce, I told her over the phone. And I want full custody. And Jessica? I have proof of tax evasion. The war had begun. And for the first time in 10 years, I wasn't fighting with my hands tied behind my back. I had a shield named Preston Vance, and I held the sword of truth. The first year passed in a blur of caffeine, graphite, and concrete. I threw myself into work with a hunger that scared even me. I wasn't just working to pay the bills, I was working to exorcise Grant from my soul. Preston kept his word. He gave me the title of Senior Lead Architect at Vance & Associates. He gave me a team. For the first time in my life, when I spoke in a meeting, men didn't interrupt me. They took notes. We launched the project The Aurora. It was the design I had hidden from Grant. A spiraling tower of glass and sustainable steel that used wind energy to power itself. It was revolutionary. We bid for the same plot of land Grant wanted for his Lakeview Spire extension. Grant's presentation was slick, full of buzzwords. Mine was technical, passionate, and visionary. I stood in front of the city planning committee, wearing my black suit, my hair cut into a sharp bob. Grant was in the back of the room. When I walked up to the podium, he stood up, shouting, "She's a fraud. That's my intellectual property." Preston's lawyers silenced him within seconds. Ms. Sterling created this design 3 months after leaving your employment, Mr. Grant. Sit down or be removed. Grant sat down, seething. I delivered my pitch. I looked the committee members in the eye. I answered every engineering question they threw at me, questions Grant would have had to ask me the answers to in private. We won the bid. The victory champagne tasted like nectar. Grant's stock took a 10% hit the next day. It was a small wound, but it was the first drop of blood. But the real transformation wasn't just in the boardroom. It was at home. I moved us into a beautiful condo overlooking the park. Holly and Hazel started at a new school. Without the constant pressure of Grant's criticism, sit up straight, don't eat that, you'll get fat, why aren't you studying? They blossomed. Holly joined the robotics club. She stopped hiding her math homework. Mom, she told me one night, eyes shining, I want to be an engineer like you. Hazel took up the cello. She played with a passion that filled our home with music, erasing the silence Grant used to enforce. And Preston. Preston became a fixture in our lives. At first, it was strictly professional. Dinners to discuss blueprints. But then, he started coming over for strategy sessions that turned into board game nights with the girls. He taught Holly how to throw a baseball. He listened to Hazel play the cello for hours, his eyes closed, a look of peaceful sorrow on his face. He never tried to be their father. He was just there. A steady, supportive presence. A mountain that blocked the wind. I remember one night, about 8 months in. We were reviewing contracts on my living room floor. The girls were asleep. "You're smiling," Preston said, looking up from a document. "Am I?" I touched my face. "You used to look like you were waiting for a bomb to go off," he said gently. "Now, you look free." "I feel free," I admitted. I never realized how heavy the chains were until they were gone. "Grant, he made me feel small so he could feel big." "He was afraid of you," Preston said. "He knew you were the magic. He tried to bottle you up. But you can't bottle lightning, Meredith." Our eyes met. There was a charge there, a sudden awareness of the quiet room, the proximity. My heart skipped a beat. But I pulled back. I wasn't ready. Not yet. The scars were still too fresh. Preston seemed to understand. He smiled, a sad, patient smile, and went back to the paperwork. Meanwhile, Grant was spiraling. Rumors reached us through the grapevine. Tiffany, his mistress, now fiancée, was spending money faster than he could make it. She demanded luxury vacations, a new car every month, massive renovations to the mansion. Grant, desperate to keep his trophy, indulged her. He was cutting corners on his construction sites to pay for her. Cheap concrete. Non-union labor. I documented everything. Every whisper, every rumor. I was building a dossier. But Grant wasn't done with me. He couldn't stand that I was succeeding. He couldn't stand that I was happy. One evening in November, just as the first snow of the season began to fall, marking almost a year since the expulsion, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find a process server. He handed me a thick envelope. "You've been served, ma'am." I opened it. It was a lawsuit. Not for the designs. Grant Sterling versus Meredith Sterling. Petition for full custody. My blood ran cold. He didn't want the girls. He had made that clear. He called them useless. So why? I read the affidavit. Mother is unfit. Works excessive hours. Living in unstable conditions. Cohabiting with a known business rival, exposing children to corporate espionage. He was using the girls to hurt me. He knew they were the only thing that could destroy me. I dropped the papers. The floor felt like it was tilting again. "Preston," I whispered, grabbing my phone. "He's coming for them." The courtroom was sterile, smelling of lemon polish and anxiety. I sat on the left, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles were white. Preston sat in the gallery behind me, a silent sentinel. Grant sat on the right, looking smug in a three-piece suit, with Tiffany hanging on his arm like an expensive ornament. Grant's lawyer, a man known as the Butcher, stood up. "Your Honor," he began, pacing before the judge. "We are here to save 2 innocent children from a chaotic, neglectful environment. Ms. Sterling works 80 hours a week. She drags these children to construction sites. She is clearly prioritizing her newfound career over her maternal duties." He projected photos on a screen. Photos of me late at night at the office. Photos of the girls eating takeout pizza. They had been following me. Stalking me. "Mr. Sterling," the lawyer continued, gesturing to Grant, "is a pillar of the community. He has a stable home, the family estate the children grew up in. He has a fiancée who is ready to dedicate her life to being a full-time stepmother. He can provide stability. Tradition. Values. I felt bile rise in my throat. Tiffany, a full-time mother? She looked at Holly and Hazel with open disdain, checking her nails while the lawyer spoke. Then it was my turn. My lawyer, Jessica, stood up. She was petite, sharp, and terrified grown men. Your Honor, let's talk about stability, Jessica said. Let's talk about the night of December 24th last year. The night Mr. Sterling evicted his children into a blizzard. Objection! Grant's lawyer shouted. Irrelevant. That is hearsay. I have weather reports, Jessica countered calmly. I have the time-stamped text message from Mr. Sterling disabling the family car. I have the affidavit from the bus driver who picked them up with mild hypothermia. The judge, a stern woman with glasses, looked over her spectacles at Grant. Overruled. Continue. Jessica laid out the facts. The financial abuse. The verbal abuse. But Grant had prepared well. He had character witnesses, his parents, his country club friends, all swearing he was a loving father and I was a hysterical, ambitious woman who walked out on her own accord. It was a he-said-she-said battle. And Grant had money to burn on experts who claimed a traditional two-parent household, him and Tiffany, was better than a single working mother. During a recess, Grant cornered me near the water fountain. Give it up, Meredith, he hissed. I don't even want them. You know that. They're annoying. But I know you want them. So here's the deal, you drop the Aurora project. You withdraw your bid for the city stadium. You admit publicly that you stole my designs. And I'll let you keep the brats. I stared at him. The mask had slipped. He was using our flesh and blood as bargaining chips for a construction contract. You are a monster, I whispered. I'm a businessman, he smirked. Tick-tock, Meredith. The judge looks like she's leaning my way. Do you really want Tiffany raising them? She hates kids. She might accidentally forget to feed them. A cold rage, sharper and deadlier than anything I had felt before, solidified in my chest. I pulled out my phone. Did you get that? I asked. Preston stepped out from the adjacent hallway. He held up his phone. Recorded. Every word. Grant's face went pale. That's illegal. You can't record without consent. Actually, Preston said, stepping closer, towering over Grant, in Illinois, there's an exception when recording evidence of a crime. And extortion? That's a crime, Grant. We walked back into the courtroom. Jessica requested an emergency sidebar. We played the recording for the judge in chambers. When we returned to the courtroom, the judge's face was stone cold. Mr. Sterling, she said, her voice cutting through the air. I have heard enough. Not only am I denying your petition for custody, but I am also granting Ms. Sterling's request for a permanent restraining order. You are to have no contact with the children until they turn 18, unless they initiate it. And you will pay full child support, retroactive to the night you evicted them. Grant slammed his fist on the table. This is a fix. You're biased. One more word, and I will hold you in contempt, the judge warned. Case closed. Grant stormed out, Tiffany trailing behind him, looking furious, not because they lost the kids, but because she knew the child support payments would cut into her shopping budget. I hugged the girls. We cried right there in the courtroom. It was over. They were mine. Safe. Preston stood at the back, smiling. He didn't intrude on the moment. He just watched, his job done. That night, after the girls were asleep, I sat on the balcony with Preston. We were drinking wine, watching the city lights. You saved us today, I said. Again. You saved yourself, Preston shook his head. I just held the phone. You were the one who stood up to him. He turned to look at me. The moonlight caught the silver in his hair. Meredith, these last 2 years, watching you fight, watching you build. I've never seen anything like it. He took my hand. This time, I didn't pull away. I know you're still healing, he said softly. But I need you to know. I'm not going anywhere. I'm in this. For the long haul. For the Aurora. For the girls. For you. I looked at this man, this powerful, kind, patient man who had picked us up off the floor. And I realized the ice around my heart had finally melted. I know, I whispered. He leaned in, and we kissed. It wasn't a fireworks kiss. It was a shelter kiss. Solid. Warm. Safe. But even as I found happiness, Grant was plotting his final, desperate gambit. He had lost the business battle. He had lost the legal battle. Now, he was going to try and destroy my reputation. And he had a secret weapon, Tiffany's womb. Or so he thought. The invitation to the wedding arrived 6 months later. And that brings us back to the jet, the lawn, and the manila envelope in my hand. Are you ready to hear what was inside? While I was building a fortress of love and success with Preston and the girls, Grant's life was turning into a Greek tragedy, the kind where the hero's fatal flaw destroys everything, except Grant was no hero. He was just a man consumed by an obsession. Thanks to the private investigator Preston had hired to ensure our safety, I knew exactly what was happening inside my old home. And honestly, it was pathetic. Grant was hemorrhaging money. The divorce settlement, even though he tried to hide assets, had cost him. The child support for the girls, which the judge made retroactive and hefty, was bleeding him dry. But instead of tightening his belt, he was spending more to keep up appearances. He was terrified that if people saw him cutting back, they would think he was weak. Enter Tiffany. Tiffany wasn't just a trophy fiancée. She was a predator who had smelled blood in the water. She knew Grant was desperate for a son, and she played him like a cheap fiddle. About 3 months after the custody hearing, Tiffany introduced a new player into the mix. A man named Vance. "This is my cousin," she told Grant over dinner one night. "He's a financial wizard. He used to manage hedge funds in New York. He can help you fix the cash flow problems, baby." Grant, whose paranoia usually made him trust no one, welcomed Vance with open arms. Why? Because Tiffany whispered in his ear that Vance was family, and unlike the professional accountants who were telling Grant to stop spending, Vance told Grant exactly what he wanted to hear. Vance was slick. He wore shiny suits and spoke in buzzwords. Grant fired his CFO, a loyal man who had worked for Grant's father for 30 years, and installed Vance as the new head of finance. It was like inviting a wolf to guard the henhouse. Within weeks, Vance and Tiffany began their operation. They set up shell companies. They created fake vendor invoices for construction materials that were never delivered. They were siphoning millions out of Grant's company right under his nose. But Grant didn't notice. He was too distracted by Tiffany's masterstroke. One evening, Tiffany came home with a sonogram image. She sat Grant down in the living room, the same living room where he had told me I was useless, and handed him the black and white photo. "It's a boy," she lied. She hadn't even been to a doctor. She bought the ultrasound image online for $20. Grant wept. The investigator told us that the neighbors could hear him shouting with joy. A son. Finally, a king. He was so blinded by his own ego, so desperate to prove his virility and secure his legacy, that he didn't ask for a blood test. He didn't insist on going to the doctor with her. He just handed her his credit card, the black card with the unlimited limit, and told her to build the perfect nursery. Buy everything, he told her. Gold cribs. Imported silk. I want the world to know the heir is coming. Tiffany and Vance went on a spending spree that would make a Kardashian blush. But they weren't buying baby clothes. They were buying diamonds, watches, and transferring cash into offshore accounts. Meanwhile, at the office, Grant became unbearable. He walked around the construction site strutting like a peacock. He called his competitors to brag. He even tried to call Preston. "I hear you're raising my daughters," Grant sneered over the phone. "That's fine. Enjoy them. I have a real heir on the way. A son. The sterling name will live on." Preston put the call on speaker so I could hear. He didn't get angry. He just looked at me and winked. "Congratulations, Grant," Preston said calmly. "I hope he takes after his mother. It would be a shame if he inherited your business sense." Grant hung up, furious. I felt a pang of pity, which surprised me. He was destroying himself. He was being robbed blind by the woman he abandoned his family for. He was celebrating a child that didn't exist. It was a house of cards built on a foundation of lies, and the wind was starting to pick up. "Do we tell him?" I asked Preston that night. "About Vance? About the money moving offshore?" Preston swirled his wine glass, looking thoughtful. "If you tell him now, he won't believe you. He'll think you're jealous. He thinks you're a bitter ex-wife trying to sabotage his happiness." "No, Meredith. Never interrupt an enemy when he is making a mistake. We wait. We let him dig the hole so deep that he can never climb out." "It feels cruel," I admitted. "Cruel was throwing a 10-year-old girl into a blizzard," Preston said, his voice hardening. This is just karma. And besides, we need him distracted. The Aurora is almost finished. We launch in 6 months. Let him focus on his imaginary prince while we build a real kingdom." So we watched. We watched as Grant signed loan after loan to cover the business expenses Vance was generating. We watched as he mortgaged the estate, the house my children grew up in, to leverage more cash. He was betting everything on this future son. He didn't know that the only thing Tiffany was pregnant with was a scheme to leave him penniless. And while Grant was chasing a phantom, I was about to receive a reality check that would change my life forever. But unlike Grant's illusion, my surprise was very, very real. 2 years had passed since the eviction. The anniversary was approaching, Christmas Eve. For weeks, I felt a shadow over my heart. The body remembers trauma even when the mind tries to move on. As the snow began to fall in Chicago, I found myself checking the weather apps constantly, terrified of a blizzard, even though I was safe in a heated penthouse. Preston noticed. He didn't say anything, but he started coming home earlier. He filled the condo with fresh flowers to combat the gray outside. On the morning of Christmas Eve, Preston told me to pack a bag. "Where are we going?" I asked, eyeing the falling snow with suspicion. "Somewhere safe," he promised. "Trust me." We took the girls. The driver took us out of the city, but not to a hotel. We drove to a private cabin Preston owned near Lake Geneva. It wasn't a sprawling mansion like Grant's estate. It was a log cabin, warm, cozy, smelling of pine and cedar. There was a massive fireplace, but unlike the one Grant had used to burn my dreams, this one was already roaring with a welcoming fire. "We are going to rewrite the memory," Preston told me as we unpacked. "December 24th is not the day you lost everything. It's going to be the day we celebrate everything we found." We spent the day sledding with Holly and Hazel. For the first time in their lives, the girls saw snow as something fun, not something deadly. We built a snowman. We had a snowball fight where Preston let Hazel tackle him into a drift. That evening, we made dinner together. No servants. Just us. We made messy tacos and laughed until our sides hurt. The girls went to bed exhausted and happy, their cheeks flushed pink. After they were asleep, Preston asked me to join him on the porch. He had set up a heater and wrapped us in thick wool blankets. We sat on a swing, watching the snow fall gently in the moonlight. It was peaceful. The silence wasn't threatening, it was holy. "Meredith," Preston said, taking my hand. His voice had a tremor I wasn't used to hearing. 2 years ago, I found you on my floor. You were broken. You were terrified. I whispered, leaning my head on his shoulder. I thought my life was over. And look at you now, he said, turning to face me. You're the lead architect on the biggest project in the Midwest. You're a mother who fought a lion for her cubs and won. You're the strongest woman I've ever met. He reached into his pocket. My breath hitched. I didn't buy a ring from a store, he said, pulling out a small velvet box. I designed it. And I had the jewelers at Tiffany's, the real Tiffany's, not the knockoff version Grant is dating, custom make it. He opened the box. Inside wasn't a diamond. It was a sapphire. A deep, royal blue sapphire, surrounded by smaller diamonds that formed the shape of a blueprint compass. Blue, he said softly. The color he told you not to wear. The color of your freedom. The color of the sky you looked at when you decided to fight back. Tears pricked my eyes. Hot, happy tears. Meredith Sterling, Preston said, sliding off the swing to kneel on the snowy porch floor. He didn't care about the cold or his pants. He looked up at me with eyes full of absolute devotion. I don't want to own you. I don't want to control you. I just want to stand beside you. I want to be the foundation under your feet when the world shakes. I want to be the father Holly and Hazel deserve. Will you marry me? I looked at him. I looked at the snow falling around us, the same snow that had once been my enemy, now acting as a glittering confetti for this moment. Yes, I choked out. Yes, Preston. 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. He stood up and pulled me into a kiss that melted the rest of the ice in my soul. I have one condition, I said, pulling back slightly, laughing through my tears. Name it, he smiled. We don't tell the world yet. I want this to be ours for a little while. Just us and the girls. Agreed, he said. But warn me, when we do tell the world, it's going to be loud. Oh, it will be loud, I promised. But first, I have a feeling 2024 is going to bring even more surprises. I didn't know how right I was. The universe has a strange sense of humor. Grant wanted a son so badly he destroyed his family for it. He was currently buying golden cribs for a phantom baby. But inside me, in that very moment on the porch, life was already beginning. 2 lives, actually. Because while Grant was chasing a lie, I was unknowingly carrying the truth. And the irony? The irony was about to become the biggest joke in Chicago. January brought a cold snap to Chicago, but I was glowing. Literally. I was tired all the time, craving pickles and peanut butter, and feeling a strange fluttering in my stomach. I thought it was stress from the upcoming Aurora launch. Preston insisted I see a doctor. Dr. Evans, a kind woman with warm hands, ran the ultrasound. Preston stood beside me, holding my hand, looking anxious. He thought maybe I was sick. Well, Dr. Evans said, smiling behind her mask. I see the problem. What is it? Preston asked, his grip tightening. Is it a tumor? Dr. Evans laughed. No, Mr. Vance. It's a heartbeat. Actually, wait. She moved the wand. It's 2 heartbeats. The room went silent. The hum of the machine seemed to amplify. Pregnant? I whispered. But I'm 41. We weren't even really trying. Life finds a way, Dr. Evans winked. And judging by the positioning, yes. Do you want to know the gender? I can tell from the blood test results we ran earlier. Preston looked at me. Do you? Yes, I said. Tell us. Well, Meredith, the doctor smiled. You're going to be outnumbered. It's 2 boys. Identical twin boys. 2 boys. I burst into tears. Not of sadness, but of hysterical, overwhelming laughter. I laughed until I cried, and then I cried until I laughed again. Preston hugged me, burying his face in my neck, his shoulders shaking with emotion. He had lost a son years ago. Now, he was being given 2 boys, Preston whispered, kissing my forehead. We're having sons. The cosmic justice of it was staggering. Grant had thrown me away because my genetics were garbage, because I couldn't produce a male heir. And here I was, carrying 2 healthy sons with a man who loved me for my mind, not my womb. We went home in a daze of happiness. We told Holly and Hazel that night. They screamed with delight, immediately arguing over names and who would get to teach them baseball. But the universe wasn't done with the jokes yet. 2 days later, a courier arrived at my office. He handed me a heavy, cream-colored envelope embossed with gold leaf. It was a wedding invitation. Mr. Grant Sterling and Ms. Tiffany Miller invite you to celebrate their union. Inside, there was a handwritten note from Grant. The handwriting was jagged, rushed. Meredith. I know we have our differences, but for the sake of the girls, I think it's time to bury the hatchet. I want Holly and Hazel to be flower girls. And I want you there to witness the beginning of my new dynasty. Tiffany is expecting my heir. It's a boy. I want you to see what a real family looks like. Don't make a scene. Just come, pay your respects, and maybe I'll reconsider the alimony payments I've been fighting. Grant. I read the letter twice. The audacity was breathtaking. He wasn't inviting me to make peace. He was inviting me to humiliate me. He wanted me to sit in the back row, the discarded, barren ex-wife, watching him marry the younger, fertile mistress. He wanted to parade his heir in front of me. He needed me there to legitimize his happiness, to prove to his investors that he wasn't a monster who abandoned his family, but a benevolent patriarch who kept the peace. Rage flared up, hot and fast. I'm not going, I told Preston, throwing the invite onto his desk. He wants to gloat. He wants to show off his fake life. Preston picked up the invitation. He read it, and a slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. It was the smile of a shark who just smelled blood in the water. Oh, you're going, Preston said softly. We are all going. Why would I give him the satisfaction? Because, Preston said, tapping the heavy cardstock against his palm. We have the dossier. We know about the embezzlement. We know about the fake pregnancy. My investigator confirmed Tiffany bought a prosthetic bump online last week. And we know Grant is technically bankrupt, he's living on credit trying to fund this wedding. He stood up and walked around the desk to me. He placed his hands on my shoulders, careful of my growing belly. Meredith, he invited you to a show. Let's give him a performance. He wants to talk about heirs? Let's show him yours. He wants to talk about wealth? Let's show him real power. What are you thinking? I asked, feeling a shiver of anticipation. I just bought a new jet, Preston said casually. A Gulfstream G650. It's being delivered next week. And I also just bought something else. What? Grant's debt, Preston said. His bank was looking to offload his toxic loans. I bought them all this morning through a shell company. Technically, Meredith. I own him. I own his house. I own his company. I own the chair he sits in. My jaw dropped. You bought his debt? Every cent, Preston grinned. I can foreclose on him whenever I want. But I think. I think the wedding day is the perfect time to call in the loan. Don't you? I looked at the invitation again. Witness the beginning of my new dynasty. Yes, I said, a fierce smile mirroring Preston's. Let's go to a wedding. I need to find a dress. A blue one. Royal blue, Preston agreed. The color of queens. The weeks leading up to the wedding felt less like wedding prep and more like planning a military coup. Our penthouse became a war room. On one side of the living room, we had the baby zone, swatches for the nursery, lists of names, we liked Leo and Lucas, and vitamins. On the other side was the destruction zone. Preston's legal team, led by a ruthless shark named Mr. Sterling, no relation to Grant, ironically, laid out the timeline. Grant is putting on a facade, Mr. Sterling explained, pointing to charts on a whiteboard. He's borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. This wedding is costing him $2 million he doesn't have. He's hoping the marriage will secure a new round of investment from Tiffany's supposed rich family connections, which, as we know, don't exist. Vance is bleeding him dry. By the wedding day, Grant's liquidity will be zero. And the pregnancy? I asked, rubbing my own very real, very small bump. Fabricated, the investigator chimed in. Medical records show Tiffany had a tubal ligation 5 years ago. She can't get pregnant. The ultrasound she showed him is a stock image from Google. We have the metadata. So he's marrying a fraud, funded by theft, expecting a ghost, I summarized. It's almost too tragic to be funny. Almost, Preston said dryly. But not quite. The plan was simple but devastating. We would arrive late, ensuring maximum attention. We would interrupt the ceremony before the vows, saving Grant from legally tying himself to a fraud, a small mercy, really, though it would hurt like hell. And then, we would drop the hammer. I went for my dress fitting. I chose a designer in New York who specialized in revenge couture. The dress was a deep, electric royal blue silk. It was modest yet powerful, fitted to show off my figure but draped cleverly to conceal the early signs of my pregnancy. I wanted to save that reveal for the right moment. For Holly and Hazel, we chose matching blue outfits. They were in on the plan. They knew their father had lied about them. They knew he only wanted them there as props. We're not props, Mom, Holly said, staring at herself in the mirror. She looked so grown up. We're the main characters. That's right, I told her. Head high. Shoulders back. You are Vance's daughters now. You have dignity. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the nursery we were starting to set up. I held the invitation in my hand. Grant had sent another text that morning. Make sure the girls behave. And try to look presentable. Tiffany's family is very high class. Don't embarrass me with your cheap department store clothes. I laughed. The dress hanging in my closet cost more than Tiffany's entire dowry. Preston walked in, holding 2 cups of herbal tea. Nervous? No, I said. I feel ready. It feels like the end of a long, dark book. And the start of a sequel. Preston kissed my head. The jet is fueled. The pilot is briefed. The landing permit for the resort next door was denied, but I convinced the owner to let us land on the private strip anyway. Money talks. You bribed him? I bought the resort, Preston shrugged. It was a good investment. Besides, we need a venue for our wedding next year, right? I shook my head, marveling at this man. He moved mountains for me. Grant wouldn't even move a chair. Tomorrow, Preston said, looking at the city lights. Tomorrow, the king falls. And the queen rises, I finished. Morning came with a bright, relentless sun. We boarded the Gulf Stream. The interior smelled of fresh leather and victory. As we took off, leaving Chicago behind, I looked down at the sprawling suburbs. Somewhere down there, Grant was putting on his tuxedo, thinking he was about to have the best day of his life. He had no idea that the sky was about to fall on his head. "Ladies and gentlemen," the pilot's voice came over the intercom. "We are beginning our descent into Lake Forest. ETA to the drop zone is 10 minutes. Please fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy landing for the groom." I tightened my belt. I looked at my girls. I looked at Preston. "Showtime," I whispered. The wind from the jet engines was still whipping my hair as I stood on the platform. The silence of the crowd was suffocating. 300 pairs of eyes were glued to me. Grant stood frozen, his face a mask of shock and fury. He looked at the jet, then at me, then at the envelope in my hand. "You," he stammered, his microphone causing feedback that screeched through the speakers. "You weren't supposed to, like this. You were supposed to come in the back." "I don't do back entrances anymore, Grant," I said, my voice calm, amplified by the acoustics of the stunned silence. "You invited me to witness your dynasty. Well, here I am." Tiffany recovered first. She stepped forward, her hand dramatically clutching her padded stomach. She was wearing a dress that was too tight, too sparkly, trying too hard to be a princess. "Get out!" she shrieked. "This is my day. You jealous, barren hag." "Security! Why are you just standing there?" The security guards looked at Preston. Preston simply adjusted his cufflinks and stared them down. They knew who signed the bigger checks in this town. They didn't move. Jealous? I laughed. It was a genuine laugh. "Tiffany, honey. I'm not jealous. I'm here to save you both the trouble of a divorce lawyer in 6 months." I turned to the guests. I saw Grant's investors. I saw the bank representatives. "Grant invited you all here to celebrate a merger," I announced. "A merger of 2 wealthy families. A new heir. A fresh start. But a marriage should begin with truth, shouldn't it?" "Stop her!" Grant roared, finally lunging at me. "She's crazy. She's hysterical." Preston caught Grant's arm in midair. He didn't strike him. He just held him with a grip of iron. "Let her speak, Grant," Preston said, his voice low and dangerous. "Or I call the federal agents waiting in the parking lot." Grant went limp. "Feds? Embezzlement is a federal crime, Grant," Preston whispered. I opened the manila envelope. I pulled out the first document. It was a large, blown-up photo of a medical chart. "Fact number 1, I said, holding it up. The heir. The prince of the Sterling Empire." I turned the chart toward Tiffany. Her face went white. "This is Tiffany's medical record from St. Jude's Clinic," I read aloud. Date, 5 years ago. Procedure, tubal ligation. Diagnosis, permanently unable to conceive. A gasp rippled through the crowd. "Oh my God," someone whispered. "That's a lie!" Tiffany screamed, backing away. "It's a fake! I'm pregnant. I have ultrasounds." "You have JPEGs from a stock photo site," I countered, pulling out the second sheet. "Here is the receipt for the silicone pregnancy belly you bought from Amazon last Tuesday. Rush delivery." Grant turned slowly to look at Tiffany. His eyes were wide, confused, like a child waking up from a nightmare. "Tiffany? Baby? Tell her she's lying. Tell me about our son." Tiffany stammered, looking for an escape route. She hacked my records. It's a conspiracy." "Fact number 2, I continued, relentless. I pulled out a spreadsheet. "The money. Grant, you think you're marrying into wealth? Tiffany's cousin Vance isn't a financial wizard. He's a con artist with 3 warrants in Nevada. And together, they have siphoned $4 million from your company accounts into an offshore shell corp in the Caymans. I threw the bank transfer records at Grant's feet. They fluttered like confetti. You're broke, Grant, I said softly. You're not just broke. You're being robbed by the woman you threw your family away for. Grant looked down at the papers. He recognized the account numbers. He recognized Vance's signature. He looked at Vance, who was currently edging toward the exit of the tent. Vance? Grant croaked. Vance bolted. He knocked over a waiter and sprinted across the lawn. Stop him! Preston shouted. Two of our private security team tackled Vance before he made it to the hedges. The crowd was in chaos. People were standing up, taking photos, shouting. But I wasn't done. I had one more card to play. The ace of spades. And finally, I said, looking Grant dead in the eye. You think you still have your company? You think you can recover from this? Preston stepped forward. He handed me the final document. A deed. Grant Sterling, I said, my voice ringing out like a judge's gavel. You defaulted on your loans 3 days ago. The bank sold your debt. Do you know who bought it? Grant shook his head, tears streaming down his face. He looked broken. Small. We did, I said, pointing to Preston and myself. Vance and Associates now owns Sterling Development. We own this estate. We own your office. We own the very platform you are standing on. I took a step closer, leaning in so only he could hear the final whisper. You wanted a legacy, Grant? I am your legacy. I am the architect who is bulldozing your life. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a structure imploding, the moment after the dynamite blows but before the dust settles. Grant fell to his knees. It wasn't a theatrical gesture. His legs just gave out. He knelt on the white wood of the altar, surrounded by the papers I had thrown, evidence of his stupidity, his betrayal, his ruin. He looked up at Tiffany. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the security guards holding Vance, calculating her own survival. You. Grant whispered to her, his voice trembling with a mixture of heartbreak and rage. You said, a son. You promised me a son. Tiffany sneered. The mask of the loving fiancé dropped completely, revealing the ugly, twisted face of greed beneath. Oh, grow up, Grant, she spat. There is no son. There never was. You were just an easy mark. A desperate, old fool with an ego bigger than his brain. I loved you, Grant sobbed. I gave you everything. You gave me everything because you're a narcissist. Tiffany yelled back, not caring about the audience anymore. You didn't love me. You loved the idea of breeding. You treated your wife like cattle, and you treated me like an incubator. You deserve this. She tried to run, hiking up her dress to sprint toward the parking lot. I wouldn't do that, Preston's voice boomed. The police are blocking the main gate. They have warrants for both you and Vance for wire fraud and embezzlement. We sent the evidence packet an hour ago. Tiffany froze. Then, like a trapped animal, she collapsed onto a chair, burying her face in her hands. Grant looked around. He looked at his parents in the front row. Robert and Eleanor were pale, clutching each other. They had spent years enabling him, pushing him to find a better wife. Now, they were watching the destruction of their name. Then, Grant looked at me. His eyes were red, swollen. He looked at my dress, the blue dress. He looked at Holly and Hazel, standing tall and proud beside me. Meredith, he choked out. Help me. Please. I didn't know. I was tricked. You weren't tricked when you threw us out into a blizzard, I said coldly. You weren't tricked when you sued for custody to hurt me. You made choices, Grant. This isn't a trick. This is a consequence. He reached out a hand toward me. But, the company. My father's company. You can't take it. It's my life. It was your life, Preston corrected. Now it's an asset in my portfolio. An asset that Meredith is going to manage. She's the new CEO of Sterling Development. Effective immediately. Grant's mouth opened and closed. You're giving it to her? She built it, Preston said. She designed the buildings. She fixed your mistakes. It was always hers. I just bought the paper that proves it. Grant slumped forward, putting his forehead on the ground. He began to weep, loud, ugly sobs that echoed across the lawn. It was a pathetic sight. The man who wanted to be a king was now a beggar at the feet of the queen he exiled. I felt a tug on my hand. It was Hazel. Mom, she whispered. Let's go. He looked sad. I don't want to watch anymore. She was right. There was no joy in watching a man destroy himself. The victory wasn't in his pain, it was in our freedom. I turned to the crowd one last time. Enjoy the champagne, I said. I believe the groom paid for it. Well, technically, I paid for it, since I own his debts now. So, drink up. It's on the house. I turned my back on Grant. I took Preston's arm. We walked back down the red carpet, back toward the jet. But before I stepped onto the stairs, I stopped. I turned back to the camera crew that Grant had hired to film his triumph. I looked right into the lens. Grant wanted a son to carry his legacy, I said to the camera, placing a hand on my stomach, finally revealing the small bump beneath the silk. Well, life is funny. I'm pregnant. With twin boys. And they will be raised by a man who knows that love makes a father, not DNA. The gasp from the crowd was the last thing I heard before the jet engines fired up again. I watched Grant's face crumble as the realization hit him. He had lost his wife, his daughters, his company, and now, he realized he had lost the very thing he sacrificed it all for, his sons. But this time, they weren't his. If you are still listening, please like this video and comment the number 1 below. Let me know you are with me. Let me know you believe that karma is real and that sometimes, the good guys win. Your support means the world to me. Comment 1 now, and let me tell you what happened after the jet took off. As the door of the Gulfstream hissed shut, sealing us inside the quiet luxury of the cabin, the chaos outside was just beginning. Through the window, I watched the flashing lights of police cars swarm the venue. It looked like a movie scene. Officers were handcuffing Vance near the bushes. Tiffany was being led away, screaming and kicking, her sparkly dress looking ridiculous against the grim reality of the law. Grant was still kneeling on the altar, a solitary, broken figure amidst the ruins of his ego. His parents were arguing with an officer, probably trying to use their fading influence to stop the arrest, but it was useless. Are you okay? Preston asked, unbuckling his seatbelt to come sit beside me. He poured me a glass of sparkling water. I took a deep breath, letting the adrenaline drain out of my system. My hands were trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer magnitude of what we had just done. I searched for the word. Light. I feel weightless. You were amazing, Mom. Holly cheered from the seat across from us. Did you see his face when you showed the medical chart? It was priceless. And when you told him about the twins? Hazel added, giggling. He looked like he swallowed a lemon. I smiled at them. I'm glad you're happy, girls. But remember, we didn't do this just to be mean. We did this to stop him from hurting anyone else. And to get back what he stole from us. The company? Holly asked. The dignity, I corrected. And yes, the company too. The pilot's voice crackled. Cleared for takeoff, Mrs. Vance. Oh, sorry, Miss Sterling. Force of habit. Preston winked at me. Mrs. Vance has a nice ring to it, though. As the jet lifted off, banking sharply over Lake Michigan, I looked down one last time. The wedding venue was a speck now. The drama, the shouting, the police sirens, it all faded into silence. We flew back to Chicago. But we didn't go back to the same life. Everything had changed. When we landed, my phone exploded with notifications. The video of the confrontation, filmed by guests and leaked online, had gone viral. #KarmaForGrant and #TheArchitectRises were trending on Twitter. But the real fallout was happening in the financial world. Because Preston had triggered the default clauses in Grant's loans, the bank seized everything that evening. The locks were changed on the Sterling headquarters. The company accounts were frozen. Grant was released by the police after questioning. He wasn't technically part of the embezzlement, just the victim of it, but he walked out of the police station to find he had nowhere to go. His car? Repossessed. His estate? Foreclosure notice posted on the gate. His credit cards? Declined. He had to call his parents to pick him up. Robert and Eleanor, shamed and furious, took him back to their cottage. The king was sleeping on his parents' sofa, in the guest house of the estate he used to own. Meanwhile, Tiffany and Vance were denied bail. The evidence I had gathered was airtight. Flight risk. Massive fraud. They were going to prison for a long time. That night, back in our penthouse, Preston and I sat in the nursery. So, Preston said, looking at the two empty cribs. We own a construction company now. We do, I nodded. Sterling Development. The name has to go. Agreed, Preston said. What should we call it? Phoenix Architecture, I suggested. Because we rose from the ashes. Perfect, Preston kissed my hand. And you're the CEO. I'll stay silent partner. This is your show, Meredith. Grant is going to try to contact me, I predicted. When the shock wears off. He's going to beg. Let him, Preston said darkly. He can beg at the gate. He's never stepping foot in your life again. But I knew Grant. I knew his desperation. He wouldn't just give up. He would try one last manipulation. He would try to use the only card he had left, guilt. And sure enough, 3 days later, as I was overseeing the rebranding of the office, my receptionist called. Ms. Sterling? There's a man in the lobby. He looks disheveled. He says he's your husband. Ex-husband, I corrected, my voice cold. Does he have an appointment? No, ma'am. Security is trying to remove him, but he's causing a scene. He's shouting your name. I looked at Preston, who was sitting on the couch in my office reading a contract. He's here, I said. Preston stood up. Do you want me to handle it? I thought about it. I thought about the scared woman in the bus stop. I thought about the woman who needed a man to save her. No, I said, standing up and smoothing my blazer over my baby bump. I'll handle it. I need to close the door myself. I walked down to the lobby. Not with fear. But with finality. The lobby of the building, now the headquarters of Phoenix Architecture, was buzzing with whispers. Employees were staring toward the glass doors where 2 security guards were struggling to hold back a man who looked like he had aged 20 years in 3 days. Grant. He was wearing the same suit from the wedding, but it was wrinkled and stained. His tie was loose. He hadn't shaved. He looked like a ghost of the arrogant man who had thrown me out. When he saw me step out of the elevator, he stopped struggling. Meredith, he cried, his voice cracking. Meredith, please. Tell them. Tell them who I am. I walked closer, stopping safely behind the security line. I know who you are, Grant. You're a trespasser. I'm your husband, he shouted, desperate. We built this. This is my company. You can't just steal it. I didn't steal it, I said calmly. I bought it. Legally. Fairly. With the money I earned fixing your mistakes. He slumped against the glass. Meredith, please. I have nothing. The bank took the house. My parents, they can't support me. They're on a fixed pension. I'm sleeping on a couch. I have $10 to my name. The irony was palpable. $10. The exact amount I had in my pocket the night of the blizzard. I know the feeling, I said. It's cold at the bottom, isn't it? I'm sorry, he wept. Okay? I'm sorry. I was an idiot. Tiffany, she bewitched me. She lied to me. I didn't mean those things I said about you. About the girls. You meant every word, I said. You only regret it now because you lost. If Tiffany had actually been pregnant, if Vance hadn't robbed you, you would still be laughing at me. You're not sorry you hurt me, Grant. You're sorry you got caught. I can change, he pleaded. Give me a job. Anything. I'll work in the mailroom. I need to be near the business. It's all I have. I looked at him. Really looked at him. I searched for any shred of the man I had once loved. But there was nothing. Just a hollow shell filled with greed and need. No, I said. No? He looked stunned. But, Charity? You're a Christian woman, Meredith. Where is your mercy? My mercy was not pressing charges against you for the tax fraud Vance committed in your name, I said. My lawyers argued that you were too incompetent to know it was happening. That saved you from prison, Grant. That is my mercy. But you are not stepping foot in this building again. What about the girls? He tried, switching tactics. My daughters. I have a right to see them. You have a restraining order, I reminded him. And they saw you at the wedding. They saw you cry over a fake son while ignoring them. They don't want to see you, Grant. Holly said you looked like a sad clown. Hazel just cried. He flinched. I can fix it. I can be a dad. You had 10 years to be a dad, I said. You chose to be a critic. Now, leave. Before I have you arrested for violating the restraining order. I turned to walk away. Meredith, he screamed. You can't do this. I'm Grant Sterling. I'm a king. I stopped. I turned back one last time. No, Grant, I said softly. You're just a cautionary tale. I signaled the guards. They escorted him out. He was screaming until the revolving doors cut off the sound. I went back upstairs. I sat in my chair, the CEO's chair. I looked out the window at the city. I felt a kick. A strong one. One of the twins. It's okay, I whispered to my belly. He's gone. The bad man is gone. Grant didn't disappear immediately. He tried to sue. He tried to go to the press with sob stories about how his evil ex-wife stole his empire. But no one listened. The evidence of his cruelty was too public. The video of the wedding was too damning. He became a pariah. The country club revoked his membership. His friends stopped answering his calls. He was toxic. Within a month, he was forced to declare personal bankruptcy. The court sold his personal assets, his watch collection, his car, even his golf clubs, to pay off the remaining creditors. He was stripped bare. And then, the final blow came. Not from me, but from fate. Tiffany, desperate for a plea deal, turned state's witness against Vance. But in her testimony, she revealed that Grant had known about some of the shady zoning bribes years ago, things I didn't even know about. The DA opened a new investigation. Grant wasn't just broke, he was now facing an inquiry that could put him in federal prison if he made one wrong move. He fled. He packed a bag and took a bus out of Chicago. He went to stay with a distant cousin in Ohio, working as a manual laborer on a farm. The mighty Grant Sterling, who needed a son to inherit his empire, was now shoveling manure for minimum wage. 6 months passed. The snow melted, and spring arrived in Chicago. My belly was huge now. The twins were due any day. Preston was in full dad mode, building cribs, baby-proofing corners, and panicking every time I sneezed. We were happy. The girls were thriving. Holly won the state math Olympiad. Hazel was first chair cellist in the junior symphony. One rainy afternoon, I was at home, resting. The doorbell rang. I checked the security camera. A man in a hooded raincoat stood there. He looked thin, gaunt. It was Grant. He had come back. My heart hammered. I called security immediately, but then I paused. He wasn't banging on the door. He was just standing there, head bowed, rain dripping off his nose. He looked defeated. I spoke through the intercom. Go away, Grant. He looked up at the camera. His eyes were hollow. Meredith. I'm not here to fight. I'm not here to beg for the company. Then why are you here? I heard you're due soon, he said, his voice raspy. I wanted to give you this. He held up a small, white cardboard box. Leave it on the step, I said. Okay, he nodded. Meredith, I'm working at a warehouse now. Loading trucks. It's hard work. My back hurts every day. Honest work won't kill you, Grant, I said unsympathetically. I know, he sighed. I had a lot of time to think. In the quiet. Without the money. Without Tiffany whispering in my ear. He looked directly into the lens. I was wrong. About everything. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I broke you. I see that now. I see how happy the girls are in the photos online. They look light. They never looked that light with me. No, I said. They didn't. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Grant said. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know. I'm glad you won. If I had kept the company, I probably would have run it into the ground anyway. Or Vance would have. He placed the box on the mat. Goodbye, Meredith. Tell the girls, tell them I'm sorry I wasn't the father they needed. He turned and walked away into the rain. He walked with a limp. He looked like an old man. I waited until he was gone. Then I opened the door and retrieved the box. Inside was a teddy bear. It was old, worn, with one eye missing. It was Holly's favorite bear from when she was a baby, the one Grant had made me throw away years ago because it was ratty and cluttered up the house. He must have fished it out of storage, or kept it somewhere. There was a note. For the new babies. Don't let them grow up to be like me. I sat on the floor of the foyer and cried. Not for Grant. But for the tragedy of it all. For the waste. He could have had this. He could have had us. But he chose ego, and it cost him his soul. Preston came home an hour later. He found me holding the bear. "Did he hurt you?" Preston asked, his eyes darkening. "No," I said. "He just surrendered." "Good," Preston said. "Because if he comes back, I won't be as polite." "He won't come back," I said. "The Grant we knew is dead. That was just a ghost." That night, I went into labor. The birth was chaotic, loud, and beautiful, everything Grant hated, and everything I loved. Preston was there, holding my hand, wiping my sweat, whispering encouragement. "You've got this, my love. You are a warrior." And then, they were here. 2 screaming, red-faced, perfect boys. Ethan and Liam. When the nurse placed them on my chest, I felt a circle close. The hole in my heart that Grant had punched through was filled. Preston cried. He held Liam like he was made of glass. "Hello, son," he whispered. "I'm your dad. I'm going to take such good care of you." Holly and Hazel came in an hour later. They were awestruck. "They're so small," Holly whispered, touching Ethan's tiny hand. "Are we going to teach them math?" Hazel asked. "And cello," I said tiredly but happily. "And architecture. And how to treat women with respect." "Definitely that," Holly agreed. We took a family photo. Me in the hospital bed, holding the twins. Preston kissing my temple. The girls leaning in, smiling. We posted it on social media. The caption was simple: "The Sterling Vance family. Complete." It got thousands of likes. And I knew, somewhere in a dingy apartment in Ohio, Grant would see it. And it would be the final nail in the coffin of his pride. Life settled into a rhythm. A chaotic, sleep-deprived, wonderful rhythm. I went back to work after 3 months, bringing the babies to the office nursery I had designed. Phoenix architecture was booming. We built the Aurora Tower. It changed the skyline of Chicago. It was sleek, blue, and defiant. Every time I looked at it, I remembered the bus stop. I remembered the cold. And I thanked God for the blizzard. Because without the storm, I never would have found my true north. 2 years later. I was sitting in my office, reviewing the quarterly reports. Profits were up 40%. We were expanding to New York. My assistant buzzed me. "Ms. Vance? There's a news report you should see." I turned on the TV. Breaking news: sentencing in the Sterling fraud case. I watched as Tiffany Miller was led out of a courthouse in handcuffs. She looked haggard. No makeup. Roots showing. She was shouting at the reporters, blaming everyone but herself. Tiffany Miller sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for wire fraud and embezzlement. And then, a shot of Vance. He got 12 years. And then, a small footnote. Former CEO Grant Sterling was not charged, but sources say he is currently living in Cleveland, working as a night manager at a logistics center. I turned off the TV. Justice. Cold, hard, and absolute. They had tried to steal a kingdom they didn't build. And they ended up in cages. I looked at the photo on my desk. My 4 children. My husband. I picked up my phone and called Preston. "Hey," he answered. "Everything okay?" "Everything is perfect," I said. "I just wanted to hear your voice." "I'm picking up the girls from school," he said. "Do you want Thai food for dinner?" "Yes. And extra spring rolls." "You got it." "Love you, architect." "Love you, builder." I hung up. I spun my chair around to look at the city. Grant had wanted a legacy. He thought a legacy was a name on a building, or a son to carry a bloodline. He was wrong. A legacy isn't what you leave behind in stone. It's what you leave behind in people's hearts. My legacy was my resilient daughters. My loving sons. My partner who treated me like an equal. Grant had invited me to his wedding to humiliate me. But instead, he gave me the stage to claim my crown. The weekend of our own wedding, Preston and mine, was nothing like Grant's fiasco. We didn't do it at a resort. We did it in the backyard of our new home, a house I designed myself. It was open, full of light, with no gates, just gardens. I didn't wear a princess dress. I wore a simple white slip dress. Holly and Hazel were my bridesmaids. Ethan and Liam, now toddlers, were the ring bearers, mostly they just chewed on the pillows. There were no cameras. No investors. Just friends. Real friends. When we said our vows, Preston cried. I cried. I promise, Preston said, to never let you face a blizzard alone again. I promise, I said, to build a life with you that no storm can knock down. We danced under the stars. The same stars that had watched me shiver in the bus stop were now shining on my joy. Grant was a distant memory. A scar that had faded to white. He was the villain in the story, yes. But he was also the catalyst. Without his cruelty, I wouldn't have found my strength. Without his rejection, I wouldn't have found Preston. Without his obsession with sons, I wouldn't have appreciated my daughters. So, in a strange way, I forgave him. Not for him. But for me. I let go of the anger. I didn't need it anymore. I had too much love to carry, there was no room for hate. As the night wound down, I stood on the balcony, looking at my family. Holly was teaching Preston a TikTok dance. Hazel was chasing the twins on the grass. This was the dynasty. It wasn't built on male heirs or corporate mergers. It was built on survival. On kindness. On the refusal to give up. I raised my glass to the moon. Here's to the foolish exes, I whispered. May they always invite us to their weddings. And may we always, always have a private jet ready. Thank you for listening to my story. It's been a long journey from that cold Christmas Eve to this warm summer night. I hope my story reminds you that no matter how dark the winter gets, spring is always coming. You are stronger than you think. You are worth more than anyone's approval. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to comment one if you made it to the end. I read every single comment, and you guys are my rock. Until next time, stay strong, stay beautiful, and keep building your own empires. Goodbye for now. And so, as the chapters of this extraordinary journey close, we are reminded of the profound strength that lies within the human spirit. Life will test us in unimaginable ways, often pushing us to the edge of what we believe we can endure. Yet, it is in those darkest moments that our true character is forged, not by the circumstances we face, but by how we choose to rise above them. Meredith's story is a testament to resilience, self-worth, and the unshakable power of love for oneself, for family, and for a future built on integrity and hope. This tale also teaches us the value of letting go. Letting go of anger, of toxic people, and of the need to prove ourselves to those who never saw our worth. True victory is not in revenge but in reclaiming our peace and building a life so full of joy that it speaks louder than words ever could. Meredith didn't just survive, she thrived, proving that no storm lasts forever and that even the coldest winters can lead to the brightest springs. What about you? What lessons did this story awaken in your heart? Share your thoughts below, or simply comment good if this reflection resonated with you. Let's continue to inspire one another to find strength, rebuild, and rise.